Members, the first bill on the calendar for the day is Senate File 3432. The Chief Clerk will report the bill.
Senate File number 3432, an act relating to public safety, requiring removal of identifying equipment and insignia from emergency vehicles sold to the public.
Members, before the author explains the bill, we have an amendment at the desk to insert the House language into the Senate file. The clerk will report the amendment.
Moeller moves to amend Senate File number 3432, the third engrossment. The amendment is coded DEA 3230.
I recognize a member from Ramsey, Representative Moeller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and that is my motion, and then I'm ready to explain the bill once we adopt that. Thank you.
All those in favor of accepting the DE, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed, say nay. The motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. Representative Moeller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, leadership requested that Chair Novotny and I assemble a security package that contains a number of bills heard in various committees. And before I describe the components of this bill, I want to take a minute to emphasize its importance. First of all, this bill is not limited to legislators, as some may try to suggest later, but it is instead a crucial bill to public safety. This bill provides important protections to the public at courthouses across the state, to the public on the Capitol grounds, and to the public in the form of threat assessment by the BCA, which I'll describe later. Second, members, this bill is crucial for democracy. If judges and elected officials are not safe from violence, then our democracy ceases to exist. If people don't become judges or run for office due to fear of violence, then our democracy ceases to exist. Political violence is real. It happened here in unimaginable ways. It continues to happen. Our democracy cannot tolerate this violence, and neither can we. Now to the components of this bill that leadership of both parties asked us to cover. First, there is funding in this bill for judicial security and courthouse security. Chairs Liebling and Scott worked out the details of this provision by carefully examining the judicial branch's request and determining which priorities to include. Ultimately, this bill provides for some home and digital protections, some additional security staffing at the judicial branch to deal with the threats they face, and courthouse security grants. Those grants will be used all over the state to make courthouses safe to the public and to those who work within those buildings. And as a reminder, there have been at least 2 courthouse shootings in Minnesota in recent years. Second, this bill provides for funding to protect Capitol grounds. This funding includes continued but more limited screening during the interim and continued screening during the next session. It also incorporates some of the hardware requested by the State Patrol that was recommended in the Axtell report, things like cameras and other security systems. The majority of those items, members, are non-bondable items. Again, this funding protects not just those who work in this building, but also all of those who come into this space and the surrounding area. School groups, advocacy groups, our constituents, community members during rallies and protests. This security ensures that people can safely exercise their First Amendment rights. Again, this is essential to public safety and to our democracy. Another piece of this bill examines the safety of legislators beyond the 4 walls of this complex. Again, the threats of violence to legislators became all too real for us this summer. Threats of violence. Mr. Speaker, I'm picking up some conversation across the room.
Conversation somewhere else, please. Representative Moeller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I said, the threat of violence became all too real for us this summer. And those threats are growing, and they are continuing to grow. Representatives Green and Anderson worked on this proposal that helps bridge the gap between now and when the task force they created makes long-term recommendations. If there are credible threats of violence, this provision provides a mechanism for short-term security from the state patrol or local law enforcement. When legislators face violence in their communities, it is also unsafe for the public at the places that they go to and to their families, again, as we've seen, and neighbors. This security is vital to democracy. There is funding to cover DPS deficiency in this bill. The State Patrol obviously could not have forecasted in their budget requests last year all of the horrific things that happened in Minnesota during the interim that required their response. This ensures that they are reimbursed for those expenses. Finally, this bill funds more criminal intelligence analysts and investigators at the BCA to proactively and reactively examine threats of violence throughout the state. With the amendment I expect we'll adopt in a moment, we are ensuring that the BCA has the tools they need to examine threats made not only to elected officials, but to religious institutions, to schools, to places where the public gathers, rallies and protests. Again, this ensures our democracy, our freedom, and public safety. Mr. Speaker, I stand ready to answer questions and address amendments, but first would like to turn things over to Co-Chair Novotny.
I recognize the member from Sherburne, Representative Novotny.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Co-Chair Moeller. You did a good job of summarizing all the work that we did, so thank you, and I won't go back and revisit those, but I will just state that we have gone over this for multiple meetings and multiple days, discussing every line in this amendment that this amendment brings into the bill. It has been well argued out, and a couple of things that I'd like to point out and expand on what Chair Moeller was saying about things that we changed. For example, the request was for full-time staffing year-round, and for about a third of the price, that can be done on overtime. So we've done things like that where we just really tweaked it and really got down to the bare bones of what we need to maintain what is currently going on here and what we have to keep the building safe. Instead of adding another canine bomb dog and another employee for that, part of the agreement was that they would go and the money would go just to fund a dog and give it to an existing member of the staff that's already here. We did things like that that really cut down to the basics and get that money as low as it can be with respect to the people that are paying us to be here. As I said the other night on an unrelated bill, it's not just for the legislators that are here. It's also for the staff that is here and the people that come and go every day to keep them safe when they are here in the eye of the storm. And with that, I recommend a green vote on, not that we're at the amendment or wherever we're at, but thank you.
We are now on the amendments. There's an amendment at the desk. The Chief Clerk will report the amendment.
Moeller moves to amend Senate File Number 3432, the third engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A1.
I recognize a member from Ramsey, Representative Moeller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And this is what I referenced when I was talking about the funding for the BCA. In the bill, it is limited to examining threats, legislative threats, and that wasn't our intent. Our intent is for those criminal analysts and investigators to be able to investigate threats across the state. So hopefully this is an easy green vote for you. Thanks.
Further discussion on the amendment. I recognize a member from Sherburne, Representative Novotny.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Chair Moeller. That's a very good point. One of the things that have been brought up without going into great detail about some things that have happened in the last year, but there's a desire to have more follow-up and be proactive in things. So that is one of the reasons that I agreed that we should add the BCA agents, people that have criminal investigative experience and have statewide authority and can go out and do these follow-ups that need to be done. We can't have the expectation of staff that is limited to the Capitol here to be going out and be doing statewide investigations. So that's one of the reasons why I support this amendment and recommend a green vote.
Any further discussion on the amendment? All those in favor of the amendment, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed, say nay. The motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The chief clerk will report the amendment.
Schultz moves to amend Senate File Number 3432, the third engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A2.
I recognize the member from Morrison, Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I want to address an issue that has arisen in the last year, but has been something that has been transpiring here in Minnesota for at least the last 6 years, if not longer. And that is a concern for the capital area, the place where people come to demonstrate, come to express their First Amendment rights, where they have great First Amendment protections right here on the Capitol complex. And at the same time, the voices of Minnesotans are somewhat impacted when they choose to make their voices heard here. And what has transpired in the last several years is a number of permitted Capitol displays here on the Capitol grounds have actually been damaged, toppled. We have had Christopher Columbus thrown to the ground and not returned. We have had a cross destroyed on the grounds of the state capitol. We have had earlier this year a sculpture that said "Prosecute ICE" that was destroyed on the steps of these capitol grounds. And the concern that I want to bring before you, members, so that you're aware of it, is that we are not currently enforcing the law the same across all of these circumstances. And what I mean by that is right now, if someone destructs permitted property here at the Capitol, and that is something that the Department of Administration has permitted, the State Patrol, in an instant, has to make a decision as to what the value of the item is that has been destroyed and what the cost would be to replace it. And then, once they've made that instant decision, have to make a decision as to whether to apprehend, cite, or arrest the individual who caused the damage. This happens across our Capitol complex. It happens no matter the political perspective of the person who is causing the damage. And the issue is that our State Patrol doesn't currently know how to quickly make that decision, putting us in a rough position. And what that has resulted in is people who have destroyed property, permitted property on the Capitol grounds, have not been held accountable. There are people who have destroyed permitted property here on the Capitol grounds who have not been arrested, not spent any time in jail, and also not had to pay any fine. That's significant considering the investment that Minnesotans make on the Capitol grounds. And the rights of Minnesotans who choose to get a permitted display here at the Capitol deserves to be protected. Their First Amendment rights deserve to be protected. And so what this amendment would do is put every destruction of property on Capitol grounds on an equal playing foot, saying that if you destroy a permanent display here, you are automatically at that threshold of destroying property that would exceed $1,000. Meaning that if someone chose to do that, if the individual who kicked the Prosecute ICE sculpture, we would know with certainty that that person has committed a felony level offense, which would mean that there would be standards for our law enforcement to be able to bring the appropriate action against them. And I bring that, members, because this is an issue that we should address so that First Amendment rights are protected. Permitted First Amendment displays would be more well protected by this amendment. So, members, I hope that this is something that we can work on in the future together to protect the First Amendment rights of all Minnesotans. But at this time, I'm going to withdraw the A2 amendment.
Representative Schultz withdraws the A2 amendment. There is an amendment at the desk. The chief clerk will report the amendment.
Schultz moves to amend Senate File Number 3432, the third engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A3.
I recognize a member from Morrison, Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, thank you, first off, thank you for this chance to have this discussion today about the safety, the security of our Capitol complex and the safety and security of members that work here, the staff who works here, and to remember all that we have been through, the things that we have been through together which have led us to this point. I know that each and every one of us is devastated because we have to be having this conversation, because of what happened on June 14th, when we lost one of the most consequential leaders in state history. And as we have this conversation today, let's remember the dignity of every single human being, every single Minnesotan that chooses to engage with their state government. Members, this is one incredible building. It is one incredible complex designed by Cass Gilbert, one of our own. He was about my age when he designed this beautiful building with a grand design for how this fit into the picture of Minnesota's history, with how it fit within the confines of our state capital city, and how the steps of our state capitol should be seen as, should be presented as, the front steps of Minnesota. And today, as we discuss how Minnesotans engage with their government, I want us to all ground us in this idea that every voice matters, that every Minnesotan has the right to be heard and seen inside of their state government, and to have the chance to interact with their elected officials. Members, today I bring the A3 Amendment. The A3 Amendment is all about recognizing the hard work that is being done on a bipartisan basis in both the House and the Senate, to talk about how members of the legislature, the executive branch, the judicial branch, and the Minnesotans who choose to engage, and our staff here at the Capitol can all be safe. I admire the work, the conversation, the policy that's found within this bill. And at the same time, members, I'm concerned with what the dollars that are presented here inside this bill would achieve as it relates to restricting the access of Minnesotans to our state capitol. And I mention that, members, with love for this state, with love for its people, with love for the opposing voices that we get to hear in this chamber, but we even hear in a more authentic fashion from the people who come and choose to speak with us. Members, if you didn't know, I'm a former member of staff for the House of Representatives. And it was actually while I was staff that I've probably encountered a situation which probably made me feel the most unsafe here at the Capitol complex. When, for me, I had leaders of the Black Lives Matter movement protesting at my desk in front of my face. They were, in that moment, communicating their First Amendment rights. They had the right to do that. They had the ability to do that. And I'm glad that they came to deliver their concerns right to the halls of their state government. And I'm worried that what this underlying bill, as currently written, would do is create barriers for Minnesotans to interact with their elected officials. Other units of government in our state choose to take different precautions for the safety of their own body. They have that right. They can choose how to do it. We know that it looks different to go to the Minneapolis City Council. We know that it looks different to go to the Dakota County Board of Commissioners. We know that it looks different in different communities across the state. And I'm worried because Minnesotans are seeing this push to make it more difficult to interact with us as legislators and other elected officials where their voices should be present. And that's why today I bring this amendment so that we can take action on the good policy that is inside this bill without putting up additional barriers to access for Minnesotans. Our constitutional republic, our representative democracy, relies upon Minnesotans being able to easily engage with us directly. We benefit as a body, as elected officials, as politicians. We benefit from the raw feedback that we get from Minnesotans. It shapes our opinions, our perspectives. And now, in our conversation, I want to recenter us back to the front steps of Minnesota, our front steps of this state capitol, which are currently unable to be used by members of the legislature, by the public, by our staff. I don't even think the governor of the state of Minnesota can walk through the front doors of our state capitol right now. And members, that is because the commissioner of the Department of Public Safety made a decision on his own without input from the legislature, without our approval, without our guidance. The commissioner has the statutory authority to make that decision, but now you have a bill in front of you that says that we should appropriate the money to pay for the decisions that he made. Decisions that have directly impacted the ability for Minnesotans to engage in their government. Decisions that have resulted in our current public safety framework around the Capitol and the Capitol complex. And members, those decisions, I know, carry a vast variety of perspectives from members on both sides of the aisle. And I would argue to you that we here in this body, we represent the voice of the people of Minnesota. We carry the election certificates for the 43,000 plus people that we represent in our communities. And we should make this decision together. We should be the ones that set the guidelines and can be appropriately held accountable for the way that Minnesotans engage in their state government. Generations of Minnesotans have put hundreds of millions of dollars into the construction, renovation, and restoration of this building for its intended purpose, to allow and to set the example for the nation on how we get to interact with our government. And members, thinking now forward, thinking towards the next generation, thinking towards decades from now, we here in this body get to set the example for Minnesotans as to how it is healthy and it is good to disagree about policy and priorities. And at the same time, we can have those disagreements in this room and personally care about and care for one another. As elected officials, we bear that responsibility to set an example for people, for Minnesotans. And I hope that despite our disagreements, despite our very different political perspectives, that we can breathe the sort of trust that we want to restore in state government. This moment is about doing everything in our power, everything in our power to restore public trust, to restore the values that we expect to see in our neighbors, regardless of your political perspective. This is a hearty debate, and one that should be had here in the House. So I'm grateful. I'm grateful to the work of Chair Moeller and Chair Novotny and the other members who have had a role in crafting this bill. And I look forward to our discussion on the A3 amendment today. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
There's an amendment to the amendment at the desk. The Chief Clerk will report the amendment to the amendment.
Bakeberg moves to amend the Schultz amendment to Senate File Number 3432, the third engrossment as amended. The amendment to the amendment is coded A6.
I recognize the member from Scott, Representative Bakeberg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you to Chair Moeller and Chair Novotny for the underlying bill that we'll be discussing. And this amendment is amendment to the amendment is all around school safety. And it's fitting because literally as we speak right now, students from the school that I serve as a principal at are walking the halls of the Capitol. So, Chair Moeller, when you talked about students coming and visiting the Capitol being safe here, that resonated with me in a special way today. Because the students that I see walking the halls at school are walking the halls here in St. Paul today. And I wholeheartedly agree that we need to address the safety of not only us as politicians, but the staff and the community and the public, both here and outside of the Capitol. Since the start of session, school safety has been a top priority, I know for me and I think everyone in this chamber. The first hearing that we had for Education Finance, we heard bipartisan school safety bills, Republican and Democrat ideas to address keeping our kids safe at school. Throughout committee, we heard different proposals. On April 14th, Chair Krisha's last gavel, we heard Representative Lawrence DE amendment that was focused on keeping all kids in all schools safe. Then on April 16th, we brought an urgency House File 5015, which was the Lawrence DE that we heard in committee, and the focus of that was keeping all kids in all schools safe. None of those have moved forward. So that's why I bring this amendment today, because we need to continue to have the conversation about keeping kids safe at school. There's a lot of things that we disagree on, and we can choose to focus on what we disagree on, or we can find solutions. And I want to thank the members from both sides of the aisle that have been meeting in an ongoing manner to do that. But what this amendment does, it is based off of Representative Lawrence House File 5015, and it addresses safe schools revenue. So currently, all public schools across Minnesota receive $36 in safe schools revenue. That amount has not changed in over 10 years. What this amendment does is it increases that amount by $10. I'll say it's not enough. Representative Lawrence's bill, the total package was about $50 million. But what it does is it increases safe school revenue by $10 per pupil. So multiply it out, that's how much your individual school would get. For me, in the district that I serve, it would equal about $20,000, and that would offset the cost that we pay out of our general fund for our school resource officer. What the bill also does is it extends $46 to charter schools, to non-public schools, and to tribal schools, because the foundational element of the Lawrence bill, but just fundamentally my belief, regardless of where a kid goes to school, they should be safe. So that's why all schools would be at that $46 threshold for safe schools revenue. Those dollars, these are the epitome of funding and flexibility, because we can use that based off of what the need is locally. It can be used for mental health support, for staff, for counselors, for social workers, for school psychologists. These safe schools dollars can be used for drug abuse staff. They can be used for making physical changes to the building. This year, we added, in the district that I'm at, we added keyed entry and some glazing on windows that you can see out of, but someone outside the building can't see in. There is not enough money in the Safe Schools account to do all of the things that schools want to do. That's why it is critical that we come together and do this, and that's why I'm bringing this amendment today. These Safe Schools revenue can also be used for the school resource officer. As I said, this amount hasn't been increased in over 10 years. Priorities matter, members. Priorities matter. I firmly believe that we need to make sure that people that come to the Capitol need to be safe. But I also firmly believe that we cannot do that before we pass bipartisan school safety reforms to keep our kids safe. Not only when they're walking the halls of the Capitol, but when they're walking the halls of our schools each and every day. Members, I'd appreciate your support.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
State your point of order.
Mr. Speaker, under 321B, amendments to amendments cannot introduce a new subject. This is introducing a new subject, which is school aid. It is also introducing a new chapter, 126C, education funding, which is contained nowhere in the underlying amendment or the underlying bill. It's not a close call, and I ask that you find my point of order well taken.
Advice. I recognize the member from Anoka, Representative Engen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In reference to this very bill, Chair Moeller had suggested that this is about more than just legislator safety, that this is about the safety of anybody who walks these halls, including students from schools across the state. This amendment references those very same schools and students from across the state, and it uses those resources, those dollars, to protect them every day rather than just when they are up here at the Capitol. So I ask that you find my advice well taken.
Further advice. I recognize the member from Scott, Representative Bakeberg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would echo what Representative Engen just said. I think the bottom line is priorities matter. I walked through the different things that we've tried to do in this bill and in this amendment, and I think it's important that we do whatever we can do. During committee, we heard multiple roadblocks about why we can or cannot do different things, and we just need to get this, to prioritize our kids, to make sure that we are providing the funding and the flexibility to keep kids safe in school.
Any further advice? Again, I recognize a member from Ramsey, Representative Moeller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, just when I say the word student in the course of describing the bill, that does not make this secondary amendment germane. I'll also say that rules matter in this body, and Leader Long correctly described the rule pertaining to secondary amendments. This secondary amendment is clearly not germane.
Well, members, I have come to determination. I've studied the amendment. I have reviewed the bill. I've looked at our rules, considered your advice. I'm ruling that the point of order is well taken.
Mr. Speaker, I appeal the ruling of the Speaker and request a roll call.
Representative Niska appeals the ruling of the Speaker and requests a roll call. There will be a roll call. Representative Niska.
Members vote no.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will
Mr. Speaker.
I recognize a member from Hennepin, Representative Long.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to advise that members uphold your wise ruling. 321B is very clear that amendments to amendments cannot introduce a new subject. School aid is nowhere in the underlying amendment. School aid is nowhere in the underlying bill. This is an entirely different bill that was introduced in an entirely different committee on an entirely different subject, and is trying to be brought into this bill to make a point. I understand the point, but this is not the home for it. We already had a vote on it to suspend the rules, but trying to bend our rules over to get a vote is not the way to do it on the floor. Thank you.
I recognize a member from Scott, Representative Bakeberg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, Representative Long, I would never want to bend the rules in front of the students that are here from my own building here. So I would never want to do that. But I think we just have to have an honest conversation about the priorities that we have here in this chamber. So priorities matter, and I walked through first committee hearing that Chair Crecia had. We heard bipartisan school safety bills. April 14th, we heard the DE of the Lawrence Amendment to keep all kids safe in all schools. Then on the 16th, we heard the DFL proposal, and then that day we had an urgency as well. We need to prioritize. We need to get something done that we can agree on to keep kids safe in school. There are items that we agree to. We can work together to make sure that kids are safe in school. And I just have to be honest, and I respect Chair Moeller and Chair Novotny and the work that has been done. But I have to be honest that I struggle with voting to protect us as politicians before we can agree to vote to find things that we can come together on to protect our kids in school. I just struggle with that. And I know many of you do across the political spectrum. But priorities matter. And I do not understand how we have not come to a conclusion to keep our kids safe in school that we agree on. And we can go into a conversation about things that we don't agree on. But there's a lot that we can agree on. Members, we have a few days left in session, and that would be my urge, my charge, my challenge. Let's figure out what we can do to come together to keep kids safe in school. Thank you.
I recognize a member from Anoka, Representative Engen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Representative Bakeberg, for this amendment. I share in all of those same concerns. And I also recognize the enormous amount of trauma that has been inflicted and shared by members on our side of the aisle for the events of June 14th. I sincerely do. Hardly a day goes by that we don't think about it, and that we haven't changed our lifestyle outside of this very building because of what happened on that tragic day. But we also need to recognize the trauma that's shared across over 400 independent school districts in over 2,500 school buildings across this very state right now. Not many people know this. Each independent school district faces on average 8.5 critical incidents per year. It wasn't that long ago that I went to go let out my parents' dog at their place before coming to work. And my brother, who's a senior at White Bear High School, was at home. It was, I believe, a Tuesday. I said, "What are you doing here? Shouldn't you be at school?" "Yeah, but we had to go into lockdown again because somebody brought a gun into the building." He said it like it was no big deal, because it happens all the time. And on August 27th, when we were all once again, tragically, wide awake to the trauma of what is going on in our schools, the events of Annunciation, I remember watching on the news as one family member, I believe it was the mother of a student who attends Annunciation, was on camera saying, "We need to do something. Something needs to get done." Yes, it does. But now we're going to sit here and we are going to use our own institutional rules of germaneness as the reason why we should be prioritizing our own safety before their own? It's wrong. I've been assured by several people that conversations are ongoing about a school safety package. It should already be here. We should be putting that conversation before this one. I'll be voting to overturn the ruling of the Speaker, and you should too, for that very reason. To put those kids before we put ourselves in these priorities. Thank you, Representative Bakebird.
I recognize a member from Olmsted, Representative Quam.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and rules matter. But there are some rules in my life that I give precedence to. And kids first, and their safety first. I'm a parent, I'm used to having appropriate priorities. But even before I was a parent, I grew up on a farm, and a child was on a tractor, climbed up on it, and accidentally released the brake. My first thought was run to it and stop it, and their safety. So if rules come up here, I have some core rules of putting children's safety first, and I'm going to vote with that core rule.
Members, I'm going to remind you that the question before the body is, shall the decision of the Speaker stand as the judgment of the House? A yes or a green vote supports the ruling of the Speaker, and a red or a no vote goes against the ruling of the Speaker. With that, the clerk will take the roll. Members, please vote. The clerk will call the names of the members voting remotely.
Burkle. Burkle. Kozlowski.
Kozlowski, aye.
Kozlowski votes aye. McDonald.
Oh, do it one more time. One more time. Do it again.
Strong.
Yep.
All right.
One more time. No.
McDonald.
One more time.
McDonald, no.
McDonald votes no. Momani Hiltzley.
Hiltzley votes aye.
Momani Hiltzley, aye.
Momani Hiltzley votes aye. Wolgamott.
Wolgamott votes aye.
Wolgamott votes aye. Burkle.
Burkle, no.
Burkle votes no.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 69 yeas and 62 nays, it is the judgment of the House that the decision of the Speaker shall stand. Now to the underlying amendment. Discussion. I recognize a member from Ramsey, Representative Moeller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There was a lot of words were said when the A3 was presented, but I actually didn't hear anything describing what the A3 amendment actually does. And the A3 amendment, members, eliminates all the appropriations in this bill. It guts all of the security in this bill. This amendment is contrary to public safety. It stops the funding at the courthouses. It stops the funding at the Capitol complex and across the state. It would leave those groups coming to the Capitol at risk. It's anti-law enforcement and anti-public safety. It removes the deficiency funding for the state patrol response to the events that happened in the interim. It removes the funding that the BCA needs to determine if there are credible threats of violence to anyone across the state. I heard discussion, thanking us for working on this and talking about the importance of security, but the amendment speaks louder than words because it defunds security. I also heard discussion about the need to protect the dignity of every Minnesotan to engage with government, that every voice is important. This amendment guts that. It makes people not safe when they're exercising their First Amendment rights, when they're coming to the Capitol to talk to their legislators, when they're on the Capitol grounds at protests or rallies. I heard discussion that the bill itself would create barriers for interaction with the public. But I wonder what barriers those are that you are trying to accomplish with this amendment. You talked about certain doors being locked, but your amendment, again, guts judicial security, it guts BCA funding, it guts the DPS deficiency funding. That doesn't have anything to do with those barriers that you said exist. And I would argue, member, that it's a barrier to the First Amendment if people feel unsafe and they don't come here because they don't feel safe. I'll also note that I found it odd to hear that it should be up to the legislators to decide what doors should be locked. Again, your amendment doesn't address the problem you say exists. That's really up to the professionals here. And those decisions and the decisions that are made in the underlying bill are based in large part on the Axtell report when there was a comprehensive review of the security needs for this building. You said that this amendment restores the public trust. And again, it does not restore the public trust to remove all of these measures that make the public safe. Again, safe in courthouses, safe when they come here, the BCA threat assessment, looking proactively to determine if there are threats, not just for elected officials, but for schools, for religious institutions, for large gatherings, for events across the state. So the bill itself restores the public trust. The amendment does the opposite. And before I forget, Mr. Speaker, I would request a roll call.
Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Moeller.
And for all of those reasons, Mr. Speaker, I recommend a no vote on the amendment.
I recognize the member from Washington, Representative Anderson, P.E.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also rise against the amendment. I'll be very brief, but the amendment, I did agree with many of the points that Representative Schultz brought up, and I thank you for your words. But the amendment also deletes the Legislative Services Unit that we've worked very hard, Representative Green and myself, to establish, and is very much needed, I think, in this legislature. So for that reason, I ask for a no vote. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Wright, Representative Hudson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate you, Representative Schultz, for bringing this amendment. I rise in support of it. I also appreciate the fact that considering this amendment gives me the opportunity to address something publicly that has been a stick in my craw for quite some time, since the beginning of the session. And I mean, we talk about feeling safe and being triggered. Feel a little triggered right now, because what I'm hearing as justification for the capital security plan in this bill is the perpetuation of the illusion that in order to be safe, we need to have physical limitations to how people can conduct their business. That is not how this works. Roll back the clock just a couple of years. You don't even have to go that far, 1 year. Oh, particularly, we will go a couple of years, because back when we were over in the SLB, I was so proud as a resident of this state and as a member of this institution, the accessibility, the level of access, and the freedom that we had as members to enter wherever we decided we needed to enter, for whatever reason we decided we needed to enter that way, and to exit the same way. What we've replaced that with, in the name of security, is one of the most ludicrous arrangements imaginable from an objective security perspective. So your concern is that somebody's going to do harm to a member of the legislature. So you go from a system where we have access to numerous doors all around the campus, and you decide, you know what would be a good idea? It'd be a good idea if everybody knew exactly what door we're going to go in and exactly around which time. And as we pick which door to pick, let's pick the one that's in a classic ambush point under a tunnel. Great job, DPS, Department of Public Safety. They came up with that. You don't need to be a tactical genius to understand how ludicrous that setup is. And we're going to codify it into law permanently going forward? Imagine if for some reason you found yourself accosted by a mob that wished to do you harm, but you were on the wrong side of the building. You're over on the west side, or the east side, or perhaps the north side. How are you going to get in the building, find safety? Your cart doesn't work. I guess you can run. I guess you can run around to the south side. Hope maybe you get somebody's attention as you're going. We are objectively less safe as a direct result of this absurd security theater that we have established this year, and it is theater. And to drive the point home, the way this is being framed, as if we're defunding security, we're defunding safety, we're defunding law enforcement, is the premise that none of that exists now? Because that's what would have to be true. Is there no security? Is there no safety? Is there no law enforcement? How did the circumstances arise that we find ourselves in the position where we're even talking about this today? Is it nobody's job to keep us safe? Or do we have a distorted view of what safety is? It's not having people standing around. looking dangerous. It's having a plan of action and a process of accountability when people do things that are outside the lines of acceptable behavior. On this campus, in this building, we have repeatedly had people destroy permitted displays. We've had crowds take over committee hearing rooms. No arrests. Weird that. No prosecutions either. You know, when I go to the airport, you know what keeps me, aside from the fact that I have no desire to, what keeps me from jumping over the fence? It's not the razor wire. It's not the physical impediment. It's the fact that if I do that, I'm going to suffer extreme legal consequence for violating the sanctity of that space. That's what keeps people out of there. Not a bunch of guys standing around holding hands, making a miles-long barrier, not ensuring people that can only come in one door of the terminal. It's consequences. It's process. It's having a plan. It's holding people accountable. That's what keeps you safe. If you want to be safe in this building, start electing prosecutors who will prosecute. You want to be safe in this building? Start appointing commissioners who are focused on accountability rather than theater. We never had this problem before in the entire history of this institution. But now we need to pass this, otherwise there's no safety. How did you get here? How has every other house preceding us survived the complete lack of safety?
Any further discussion? I recognize the member from Sherburne, Representative Novotny.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If you can't tell, there's a lot of frustration that has been going on, and it didn't start on June 14th of last year. It started well before that. And I'm reminded of the saying that, you know, all animals are equal and some animals are more equal than others. We've seen that in our public safety hearing on the first night that we tried doing that. I've seen the way other things are treated, and I just want to bring to a point. And I'm going to speak to why we're frustrated, and I understand why Representative Schultz brought this amendment. But, for example, on April 13th of this year, I requested information about permitted events at the state capitol grounds. And I just wanted simple information. The cost of each event, including security cost, which of the event organizers were charged, how much they were charged, and which cost, if any, were absorbed, and the amount of the costs that were absorbed. And specifically, because that's why I was asking when we were doing these negotiations about the capital security bill that the governor's office put forward, and that's what we're working off today. We amended out, you know, and it changed with the language that we put in with Chair Moeller's first amendment. But specifically, we wanted to be sure to include the cost of renting temporary barricades. We wanted that data from January 1st, 2023 until April 12th, 2026. So I'll do the math, 2.5 weeks. 2.5 weeks to get simple numbers on what happened, how much was done, and who paid for it. And I'm still waiting. I'm the co-chair of a committee that they're asking us to spend millions and millions of dollars for, and I can't even get an answer from the Department of Public Safety or the Department of Administration. So I understand Representative Schultz's frustration, and everyone else should too. That being said, In caucus, we had long discussions talking about how it's a broken system and they're not going to give money to a broken system. There's lots of suggestions, there's lots of changes, there's lots of fixes in this bill. I understand the frustration that's been expressed, both in the floor and personally. I understand that frustration. I've been part of some of those things and in some of those meetings that you were in and that you were frustrated for. I haven't had the threats at my home that some of us have. I haven't had to live through that. I am sorry for the ones that have. But there are several fixes in this bill, as I said, and I understand the frustration, but we need to fix this. Taking all the money out will not fix that. Taking all the money out will not help us get to the situation that we want to make better. So with that, I am going to advise and request that you vote against this amendment and leave the money in. We do have conference committee to go to. You know, this will not be the final bill that passes the floor. We can make changes, but for that, I recommend a no vote on this amendment.
I recognize the member from Ramsey, Representative Pinto.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just need to just point out the points made by Representative Hudson that talk about physical barriers not doing anything, and what we really need is to look at laws, which feels like the exact opposite of what I hear when it comes to barriers at schools and to legal restrictions on the use of guns by dangerous people. Saying what we really need is we need to say that there's a law that you won't do a certain thing, and yet I hear so much from my colleagues that criminals won't follow laws. When I'm considering security guidance, when I'm thinking about what's going to keep us safest, I'm going to be listening to the State Patrol and security professionals. I'm not going to be listening to folks who don't have that background. Members, I urge that we vote against this. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Any further discussion? I recognize the member from Wright, Representative Hudson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I didn't plan on rising again, but since it was implied that I don't know what I'm talking about because I don't have a background, I spent the better part of 2 decades working in the public safety space. As a supervisor, as a manager, various environments, worked for the federal government as a contractor, keeping our air traffic controllers safe. I know a little bit about what I'm talking about. But again, you don't need to be some sort of genius or professional to understand what I just explained. We have 134 very important people, VIPs. Before this year, good luck finding them if you don't have an appointment, because they could be anywhere. They could be going in any door, out any door. You don't know when. Can't predict it. Same thing in this chamber. We can come in there, we can come in there, there. We can go down the stairs in the back, right? We got all these options. It adds diversity of possibilities. Makes it harder to target somebody if you're looking to target them. But imagine if we decided, you know, out of some convoluted idea of safety that you can only go out those doors, that's it. You can only go out those. Well, now, if somebody's looking for you, they know exactly where to find you. And they know when. We post the times when we're going to be here. You can watch online on YouTube and see when we adjourn. Oh, they just adjourned. All right, I'm ready. Here he comes. Definitely coming through this door. Same applies to this building. And I don't know, I think my 12-year-old could understand that. Not a public safety expert, but he exists and has a brain.
Any further discussion? I recognize the member from Morrison, the author of the amendment, Representative Schultz.
Mr. Speaker and members, with this important debate in front of us, let's remember that our state capitol, these capitol grounds, have kept members of the legislature safe since 1858. And on these particular grounds, Mr. Speaker, it's been close to 120 years. And when I thought about returning to the legislature in the wake of the most horrific tragedy in Minnesota's political history, I wanted us to be thoughtful and thorough, to lead with grace, and to seek understanding from different perspectives, and to do everything in our power to lead for Minnesotans in a way that helps to restore public trust. I don't have any polling, but it feels at this moment in Minnesota history like restoring the public trust is the most important thing that we need to do. And that comes from our personal relationships, our individual communication, and the way that we seek to bring people together. My goal with this amendment, Mr. Speaker, although we've heard some different perspectives from members, is that the bill that we pass off the floor of the House of Representatives would be the most broadly supported bill possible for public safety, and to ensure that Minnesotans don't have barriers to interact with their elected officials. I didn't expect, Mr. Speaker, to have a bill in front of the House of Representatives that in the next 4 years spends over $44 million on this facility right here, this Capitol building. In the next 4 years, $44 million. If I remember, Mr. Speaker, the debates that we had at the end of last session, finding the pennies in the couch cushions meant that we ended the state funding for a train to Duluth so that we could backfill funding for a priority with regards to our schools. But here, Mr. Speaker, we're asking members of this body to spend $44 million in the next 4 years alone and ongoing into the future on this building where elected officials, to my knowledge, have been safe, and that Minnesotans have been safe. Our Department of Public Safety, our Sergeant at Arms, whether in the House or the Senate, the staff that we have, they're already tasked with the responsibility, with their current appropriation, to keep us safe. And it's not lost on me, Mr. Speaker, that the legislature has its largest appropriation in state history, that the Department of Public Safety has the largest appropriation ever in state history. And here we have a bill that, if you go back to its core, drastically changes the intentions that Cass Gilbert had when he designed this building so that Minnesotans could interact with their government, could interact with their elected officials. For the Minnesotans who are listening at home, we are just like you. There's teachers, there's law enforcement officers, there's businessmen and women, there are firemen. We're normal, everyday folks, just like you. We all go for groceries, we all have kids in school or grandkids. And the debate right now before this body is whether $44 million should be spent additionally to go beyond, specifically this complex, the Capitol building, not anything else, to go for securing this building that the Department of Public Safety has the responsibility to do already. And from everything that I have heard, while I am not privy to the Axtell report, from everything that I have heard, the Department of Public Safety has actually told members of the Public Safety Committee that they are able to absorb the costs. So, Mr. Speaker, in the lens of the priorities for Minnesotans, in the lens of ensuring, most specifically, that we are securing the rights for Minnesotans to reach their elected officials, I am asking for your green vote. On the A3 amendment, so that our government can be one that restores the public trust. I made mention earlier of how different political subdivisions of the state of Minnesota do public meetings differently. And one example really stood out to me. In the largest county in Minnesota by landmass, with one of the state's largest cities, in the city of Duluth, in St. Louis County, Minnesotans can go engage with their county government and not have to go through any security screening, and they can go address and speak to their commissioners directly. But they go further. Members, that county board chooses to go and have their meetings in different locations in their county on, I believe, a monthly basis, because they want to be closest to the people. We are the House of Representatives. We're elected every 2 years. We are known as the People's House. And yet, in these last 6 years, this institution has created barrier after barrier after barrier after barrier after barrier to Minnesotans reaching their elected officials. Members, we have to change our trajectory. To the Minnesotans listening at home, I want you to be aware of something. We are here in this body, in this chamber right now, 134 members. And yet when we go back to our office building after this vote, Republican members have no ability to even go communicate with our colleagues on the left. We have to be let in to spaces to reach someone of the opposing viewpoint. We're straight up locked out. We are locked out from having the conversations about the future of Minnesota. And if we continue our current trajectory, the voices of Minnesotans will continue to be hampered. So I'm asking for your green vote because we have bigger priorities. We have bigger priorities than spending $44 million on the way that we do public safety here at this building. And I expect more. I demand more from the Department of Public Safety and our sergeants at arms to ensure that the conversations that we have and that our spaces here at the Capitol, that they're safe. But we don't need $44 million to do it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
There being no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. Members, please vote. The chief clerk will call the names of the members voting remotely.
Burkle.
Okay, go ahead, John.
Burkle, no.
Burkle votes no. Kozlowski.
Kozlowski, no.
Kozlowski votes no. McDonald.
McDonald, yes.
McDonald votes aye. Momani Hiltsley.
Momanya Hiltsley, no.
Momani Hiltsley votes no. Walgamot.
Walgamot votes no.
Walgamot votes no.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 37 yeas and 94 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There are no further amendments at the desk. The chief clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, Senate File number 3432 as amended.
Third reading. I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Green.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I first want to just give a quick thank you to Chair Moeller and Chair Novotny for bringing this bill to the floor for a vote. I appreciate the thoughtful collaboration and all the intentional work that has taken place, especially on the legislative services section of this bill. I'm also proud to have joined efforts with Senator Hoffman and Representative Patty Anderson to have some really good discussions. Before I start, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the Department of Public Safety, Capitol Security, Sergeant at Arms, our Gold Ties, State Patrol, and the BCA, and the dedicated service that you provide to all of us and to the public here at the Capitol. I can only imagine how difficult the last year has been for each of you. I also want to recognize the profound loss you experienced with the death of Melissa Hortman. Your commitment to this institution, to public service, and to keeping people safe never wavered. So sincerely, thank you. Members, State Patrol and the BCA report they have already investigated 61 total threats in 2026. That's compared to 99 total investigations and threats in 2025 and 18 in 2024. The Sergeant of Arms Office has seen a 400% increase, 400% increase of reported, recorded, and referrals from the same time frame of 2025 to 2026. The demand is growing, and so must our capacity to respond. Because while we serve in public office, we are also human beings with families, staff, and communities who are impacted by the increasing volume and seriousness of threats directed at elected officials. This body understands these heartbreaking consequences intimately. Consequences are not feelings or theater or make-believe. Minnesota's experiences are part of a broader national pattern of increasing political violence. The U.S. Capitol Police reported investigating roughly 9,500 threats against federal lawmakers, staff, and families in 2024, and nearly 15,000 in 2025. That is more than double a year ago, or a decade ago, excuse me. In particular, research consistently shows that women, elected officials, experience higher levels of threats and harassment than their male colleagues. And those threats are often more personal, more targeted, and more violent in nature. But the safety of elected officials cannot depend on gender, geography, seniority, visibility, or party. And the security response to threats cannot be subjective or relational. Every member needs to be safe so they can do the important work that the public elected them to do. Standardizing protocols, coordination and communication across multiple law enforcement entities is complex, it is nuanced, and it is evolving. That is why sustained investment matters. Without dedicated resources, we face real limitations in detecting, analyzing, and responding to violent threats in real time, especially outside normal business hours and beyond the walls of this Capitol. It is also important to understand that the increased demand for dedicated resources did not emerge overnight. The work has very much already been happening through the Sergeant at Arms Office, the BCA, the Fusion Center, with coordinated threat assessment efforts. But really, ultimately, this is about a lot more than individual safety. The strength of Capitol security and a dedicated legislative services unit directly impacts our ability to function as a government. Because when legislators are threatened, intimidated, or left without adequate protection, it does not just impact the individual, it impacts democracy itself. It affects who feels safe stepping forward to serve, how public officials engage with their communities, and the ability of government to operate openly and effectively. It is how we protect our First Amendment right. That responsibility belongs to all of us, and that is why this bill matters to all Minnesotans. Thank you.
I recognize a member from Scott, Representative Bakeberg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, members. I just want to thank Chair Novotny and Chair Moeller for the work on the bill. And as I said before, priorities matter. Priorities matter as we're moving through. And I firmly believe that we need to have strong security here at the Capitol and for members at home, because Representative Green, something you said really resonated about those of us that are currently serving, but those that may choose to serve in the future. And that's something that I've heard a lot from people, of really just disengaging in the political process, not even just running for office, but just not even wanting to be involved in politics and the rhetoric that comes along with it. So thank you for bringing that point. I just want to be very clear that when I vote no today on this bill, my hope is that when it comes back, there will be school security along with this. Because and as I said before, I can't square in my mind how to vote to protect myself when we haven't voted to protect kids. So that's why I'll be voting no, and I hope that when this comes back, we will have a strong school security bipartisan package for our students. Thank you.
I recognize a member from Dakota, Representative Roach.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to first acknowledge I appreciate the work that was done here. I appreciate the Sergeant's office, but I think this is, we're getting our priorities mixed up here. As someone who's probably the newest, the most recent member of the body to have personal threats against their life, just this week, I've spent numerous times sitting with the Sergeant's office and the BCA, multiple threats this week. My kids aren't staying at our house because of the threats. Last week there was a news story by Democrats Deliver, an online news publication that has manipulated the language of a bill that was voted on this floor and has put my personal safety at harm and my family. With that said, we need to do something about school safety. And we should be making that a priority before we put our safety here at the Capitol. You know, Representative Hudson made some very valid points, as well as Representative Bakeberg. And I wish and hope that we can bring a school safety bill here that will do just that. I know Representative Engen has been working for many years on legislation that would do that. And so I'm hopeful that the body can get together and bring something forward that will actually take care of our kids instead of putting us politicians before them.
I urge
a no vote.
I recognize a member from Washington, Representative Anderson, PE.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I'm sorry to hear that, Representative Roach. I know what you're going through, as do many of us here. So, I want to start to say the bill's not perfect. I think it frankly spends more money than it should. I think I very much agree with some of the other speakers that school safety money has to come first. Absolutely has to come first. But there are also some really good policy things in this bill, things that are needed. And because of that, I'm going to support the bill now. I know it's going to conference. Well, should this pass the House, it's going to go to a conference. And I hope that in that conference, we can do other things. We can really look at the costs that the State Patrol has asked us for, which I think are excessive, and we can really find and look for money for our schools, all of our schools, because that has to come first. And I will say, even though I'm a supporter of the bill, I helped draft some of the sections of the bill, but I will not vote for this bill when it comes back after conference unless we have passed school safety money for our schools, because that has to come first. So thank you, members.
I recognize a member from Isanti, Representative Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I cannot support spending $40 million on our own safety when we haven't committed a dime to school safety. We spend billions of dollars per year that are, shall we say, extracurricular to our main functions. We're required to provide an education. And at the very least, that education should involve a parent being able to send their kids to a school where they feel they'll be kept safe. We should be able to find enough money to take care of this core function. I'll be voting no today, not because the idea is bad. I know our members went through hell this summer. And I want to thank Chairs Moeller and Novotny for their work on this, and I think it's important that we find a way to get this done. They say timing is everything in politics. Today is not the right time for this bill to move forward. If we can find $40 million for our own safety and security, but can't find anything for school safety, after what our state has been through, what does that say about us? Let's get this done, but let's take care of our kids first.
I recognize a member from Hennepin, Representative Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I first want to say thank you to everyone who worked on this bill, particularly the bill author. I know this has not been an easy bill to put together. It's just been emotionally draining to work on something like this. I think there's two pieces to public safety that we really have to consider. One is the real, the real physical aspect of it, but also the perception of it as well. And both of those two things are critically important. So actually, when folks were working last summer on, the security of this building, I honestly was not excited about it. I've worked in Minneapolis City Hall. I know it was mentioned earlier that other governmental buildings throughout the state don't have security. And I always used to think that Minneapolis was better than St. Paul because St. Paul City Hall had security and we didn't. And so it was a more open building. And I also used to, joke about that. But joking aside, it does trouble me that these governmental buildings, these public assets, the people's houses, we have to put up barriers to them. I'm not a fan of that, but I understand why we need to do so. I personally don't feel unsafe with the security that we have had, but I understand the rationale why others may not. And we know that as legislators here, that we put ourselves in a position that is more at risk, given our society's current relationship with guns. And that's a decision that we as a society have so far decided that we are more, again, as a society, I'm not making it red or blue right now, but that as a society, we have these certain limits on guns. But because of that certain limit, then there's an additional tax on all of us. My high school science teacher used to say, there's no such thing as a free lunch. And with our current situation with regards to gun regulation or gun control, the thing that we are giving up for a lot of people is a sense of safety, a sense of security. And I know that there are some people who have decided not to run for these seats because they don't feel safe. And so if investing money like this helps more Minnesotans feel comfortable standing up and being able to lead in their community, I think that's really valuable. Now, I know the amount of money, 40 million, is a lot of money, and I want us to think about that in relation to how we think about guns and our society's relationship to guns. Because in other places, they have a different societal relationship, and both the actual safety and the perception of safety is better. And then they don't also have to pay millions of dollars to have that perceived and actual safety. So I will be voting green on this bill. Thank you again to all of everyone's work on this. But I hope we can continue to think about that, because this is all a balance, and I don't think we quite have the right balance here.
I recognize a member from Freeborn, Representative Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this bill bothers me greatly. It's not the bill itself, but the timing. I want to thank Chair Novotny, Chair Moeller for their work on this. Obviously, it's not perfect. We've heard different arguments about it, but I could probably argue that none of our legislation is perfect in this body. We do our best, and I thank them for that. Chair Moeller, you referenced the protection of our safety as being foundational to our Constitution itself, and I fully agree with you. You are correct. We should not have to fear for the safety of ourselves or our families. And when that does happen, it can destroy democracy. We have felt that very poignantly in this own body, very personally and tragically, and it should not happen. So I do support this legislation. However, and this is a big however, I cannot in good conscience vote to add security for the protection of politicians, for all of us, and even our judges, without protecting the security of our schools and the children and staff who are in them. I just can't do that, members. Our kids need to come first. We have areas where we find agreement in how we can protect our schools. One of them came up with Representative Bakeberg's amendment. That was a good amendment. I wish we could have voted on it, but Mr. Speaker, I believe you ruled correctly that it was not germane. But we need that, and we need the other agreed upon provisions that can keep our schools more secure. There are ways we can come together on this. So I'm sadly going to be a no vote on this, because I won't vote for this before I can vote for the safety of our kids. So thank you for this. I sure hope it comes back, and I hope we can have our school safety vote before that time, because I would happily vote yes if that happens. Thank you.
I recognize a member from Hennepin, Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And a lot of people have said what I intended to say, so I'll be brief. But I have a lot of concerns about this bill, especially doing it before we have provided for the safety of kids in all our schools. The urgency last week, we could have done that. We had the opportunity to do the urgency to provide school safety funding for students no matter what system they're in, public, private, or tribal schools or charter schools. And that urgency, which is urgent, was voted down by our colleagues on the other side of the aisle. And we could take that urgency up today and then get this bill off the floor. But I do not want to pass this bill on into conference with the hope that conference is gonna come back and we'll get that other bill done. We have to put the safety of students ahead of the safety of politicians. It's that simple. And we have the opportunity, we could do it today. And there are multiple bills. Representative Lawrence has a bill. We had the amendment from Bakeberg today. I had my own bill, HF 3525. So we can solve this problem if we do the school safety bill first, and then I'd happily vote to advance this. But until we protect students, I do not think we should be voting to protect ourselves.
I recognize a member from Washington, Representative Johnson W.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The issue I have with this bill really is timing. There is a shift that I know I went through once I had my first kid. It went from thinking about myself to spending every waking moment thinking about my kids. It went from sleeping like a baby to waking up every hour wondering if that baby is breathing and what is going on. Even now, my daughter, who's 22, drives her nuts. I still make her tell me, are you coming home tonight? Are you staying at a friend? Are you at the friends? Text me and all that stuff. I just never stop thinking about it. The issue I have with this is the school safety right now, as I'm being told, is being discussed. How many bills, thousands of bills do we hear each year being discussed? And what do we hear at the end of session? We ran out of time. I cannot imagine going home, and even though my kids are grown now, looking at my neighbor's kids, going to a school and talking to anybody with kids and going door to door and talking to parents and saying, we had a bill that we spent time on. How long has it been now? All this time talking about our own security at the Capitol. But you know what? We ran out of time to find a way to keep your kids safe when they go to school. Private school, charter school, public school, does not matter. Until we figure that out, we should not be spending time talking about that. Maybe it goes off, it passes, it goes to the conference, it comes back, and then it doesn't come back. And we do talk about that other safety, school safety. But until that happens, until we have that guarantee, I can't support this bill and go home and look anybody in the eye and say this is what we did today. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I recognize a member from Washington, Representative DePel.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wanted to rise and express my sincere, deep embarrassment that this chamber is putting themselves ahead of the safety of children, that we haven't prioritized their safety, and that we haven't brought that bill to the floor. It is embarrassing, it is wrong, and it's inappropriate.
I recognize a member from Crow Wing, Representative Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, or Mr. Speaker. So I do believe it's good that we recognize the serious threats that have actually happened to many legislators in this room. I think we've done a good job of honoring our late colleague, Melissa Hortman, and her husband, Mark. And the violence on a sitting senator and his family. It's evil what happened, and it's evil what's happened to legislators in this room. Many of us have had threats against our lives. And we have done a very good job of condemning all political violence on both sides of the aisle, and I want to thank everybody for that. We've done a good job of it in committees, and I believe we've done a good job of it in our communities, because what I have and do recognize on this House floor is how hard we fight for our communities. Thank you to everyone in this room. I also believe that the response to these tragedies must focus on the right priorities. And Representative Novotny, you're a hard worker. Representative Mueller, you're a hard worker. I've come into this chamber more than once and seen you guys working together in this chamber on things. And it's very honorable. I'm sorry I'm getting emotional, but Paul, you're a good man. I'm sorry. Representative Novotny, you're a good man. So it's really hard for me to vote against something you do, because I have a lot of respect for you, sir. I don't think spending $44 million is a good way to spend the people's money. So I cannot support this. Our limited resources should go first to hardening school security, and we haven't done that yet. That should be first. We need to improve threat assessments and protecting our students above layering on more government protections, because I believe that the resources we currently have, I believe we can do a better job with what we currently have. I do. I want us to remain committed to fiscal responsibility and protecting our most vulnerable. Thank you, members, for hearing me out. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I recognize a member from Sherburne, Representative Lawrence.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I sit here and listen to all the discussion. I think how different our discussion would be today if the Safe Schools Bill would have been passed 2 weeks ago. We'd have been having a completely different discussion today had we taken in place those students and the students of our state ahead of our own thoughts. I know that many of us are spending every free hour right now signing letters to whom? Seniors. Seniors, and I'm sure like me, many of you are putting notes on them, best wishes, dream big, shoot for the stars, go after your future, all sorts of different things as we sign these letters in encouragement to encourage them in their future and their next step. And I know many of us are signing these letters right now even as we're in the House and in the free moments that we have. But yet we're talking about something other than funding their safety in their school. Something different than providing the resources that they need. And the Safe Schools Bill was very comprehensive, addressed a lot of different issues, a lot of situations, and supported our students. And really put the focus on our kids. Every student in every school deserves the opportunity to be safe. And I just leave in your mind as I wrap up my comments, how different would today's discussion be if we had prioritized our students 2 weeks ago?
I recognize a member from Anoka, Representative Ingen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I don't need to belabor the point. Plenty of us have stood up and made the argument as to why this should be put to rest for now. Because it is wrong that we are putting politicians before students, that we are prioritizing ourselves before kids across this state who may be in fear simply because they're at school. It's a sad state of affairs when that's what we're going through. when that's what our students are going through. For all these reasons, I'd like to make a motion to table. We should set this aside and we should work for them first.
Representative Ingen moves to table the bill. This is a non-debatable motion. The clerk will take the roll. All those in favor signify.
Mr. Speaker, I request a roll call.
Representative Schultz, I see need 15 hands. There will be a roll call. This is a non-debatable motion. The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will call the names of the members voting remotely.
Allen.
Allen, aye.
Allen votes aye. Burkle.
Burkle, go.
Burkle votes aye.
Burkle votes aye. Kozlowski.
Kozlowski votes no.
Kozlowski votes no. McDonald.
McDonald, aye.
McDonald votes aye. Momani Hiltzley.
Momani Hiltzley, no.
Momani Hiltzley, no. Walgamont.
Walgamont votes no.
Walgamont votes no.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 63 yeas and 71 nays, the motion to lay on the table does not prevail. Members, the bill is before us still. I recognize the member from Ramsey, Representative Pinto.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I appreciate and certainly recognize the concern to making sure that our young people are safe, that everybody in our state is safe. That is absolutely critical. A reminder that the scourge of gun violence affects our young people, not just in school, but throughout our communities. So I appreciate the focus on any particular piece of legislation regarding schools. It's notable to me that to a certain extent what we talk about is hardening schools, having kids pass through a particular entrance, various aspects of that, which is interesting that it seems to be then in contrast with what we've talked about at the Capitol. But regardless, a reminder that we are failing to keep kids and all of us safe throughout our communities. So there's certainly, I agree, there is much more that needs to be done, and I've heard my colleagues say this on the other side of the aisle. There's much more we need to do to protect all of us from gun violence. And in the meantime, boy, we sure need to make sure that we take some of the steps that have been taken by, I think, 30 plus of the legislatures around the country in, for example, making sure to protect against weapons coming into the Capitol, to make sure to protect our democracy, our courts, our legislatures. There's so much we need to do for our communities. And as you're focusing on young people in one particular aspect of their lives, please don't lose sight of the need throughout all of our lives. So we're essentially paying a tax here. We're paying a fee because of our failure to address gun violence in other ways, that we at least need to make sure that we protect our democracy in this way. So members, please don't let one particular aspect get in the way of this. Let's please keep all kids safe and everybody safe in all the aspects of their lives. If they go to a concert, to a mall, if they are like the kids in Annunciation in a church, let's make sure to protect them in all those settings. Our side certainly has advanced a number of proposals to do so. So far, we have not received support. We continue to hold out hope that we'll receive that support. And let's make sure our democracy is protected in the meantime so we can then continue the work of protecting young people and all of us. Members, I urge a green vote. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I recognize a member from Morrison, Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as this bill heads to conference committee, assuming its passage, Mr. Speaker, I would ask that Chair Moeller and Chair Novotny specifically look at lines 3.11 through 3.17, and then in addition, the base adjustment for capital security. And I would just make the points to the members that this grants a significant amount of money directly to the Department of Public Safety without additional guidance. Mr. Speaker, that would be concerning to any one of us. We have no idea how the Department of Public Safety would choose next to change the way that this building works. And I would just shudder to think of what the Department of Public Safety might do next under their sole authority to spend millions and millions of dollars, specifically $15.599 million over the next 3 years to this building to make it less accessible for the people, especially in light of our great desire to spend money to support our kids and ensure that they're safe in whatever school that they go to. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I recognize a member from Beltrami, Representative Duran.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in opposition to this. And the reason why I do is because I believe we're putting our kids to the side and protecting us because of our own rhetoric has put us in the same position that we're in now. I remember my first day in the Capitol, I went to a committee. It was just the Republicans for some reason. And there was a protest in there. We were screamed at, we were yelled at, sworn at. But I know from the other side of the aisle, people actually cheered that on. But yet we want to say we're here to protect us? Who we are? But we want to let that go? The things that we do here, the rhetoric we start here, it goes on both sides. It does. So what we want to do is we want to build a fortress. We want to build this idea of security outside here because we want to keep and ramp up the rhetoric on both sides. That's on us. That's on us. It happens on both sides. You can't say it's one side or the other. But it's troubling to me how we want to set up here and put our children to the side and take care of politicians. This is one of the most unthinkable things that we can do. We can sit up here and we can talk about this all day long. I have kids in school. A lot of people have kids in school. This bill should not be before the body today because of that sole reason. How can we sit here and say, we're going to protect us, the adults, but we don't care about our kids? It's a little bit ridiculous for us to do this. This is poor timing for this bill. And to think about, we have to protect the politicians, otherwise our democracy is going to fail and everything else. Well, what about our cops? We demonize our cops. We got to protect judges because they can't do their job. Yet it's okay for us to demonize law enforcement. We can go down that road. Got people shaking their head. You got to remember, I was in that time where it was to defund the cops, and I was getting threats all the time, and, you know, working that good. Where was politicians standing up for them? But it's okay. because we want to protect the politicians. This is, guys, we're sitting here talking about spending money on situations that realistically we put ourselves in, because we'd never tone down the rhetoric. There's lots of things that we can do to work together for the benefit of the state of Minnesota, but we refuse to boost up our kids, to push our kids in the right direction, safety for the children. It's okay that this falls on deaf ears. But when we go back and we vote for this bill, we're saying that it's okay to push our kids to the side and we will protect politicians before our children.
I recognize a member from Hennepin, Representative Sensor-Murrah.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I went to a school that was pretty hardened. I actually went to the same high school as Representative Greenman and Representative Gomez. I think we are very proud. We have 3 alumni of South High School in Minneapolis in the Minnesota House. I don't know if any other high school in the state can beat that. But it's certainly a hard school. It was built in the 1970s. Or 1980s, when there was a lot of campus protests, and the way that they designed the school is there is essentially no windows, so that no student can jump out, no riots or protests can get in. Also has the added effect that if you are a student in Minnesota where during the winter, maybe sun doesn't come up until 8 a.m., goes down at 4 p.m., if you're a teenager at that school, you cannot see sunlight for many months. And I wouldn't say it's particularly good for a young person's psyche. I remember when I was in graduate school and I was in graduate school for education, we had to do tours of different schools. And I went to, this was in Massachusetts, in Boston, I went to a really nice, fancy private school. It was my first time ever kind of going to a private school. And I was kind of like, how much better can it be than my public? I went to a pretty good public school, had a pretty good experience, was an ugly building, but had good teachers. It's like, how much better can this school be? And I walked onto the campus of this fancy private school, and I just immediately started tearing up because it felt like exponentially better. And really because it was like, there was a freedom there that I did not experience as a student at a public school that resembled a prison, a freedom of movement, a feeling of safety. When we harden our schools, it does something to our young people's psyche. And I think that is something that I want us to keep in mind at a time where our young people are coming to us and telling us they are not okay. Hardening our schools will hurt their mental health. I want to talk about the real thing that is keeping our kids not safe, and that is guns. And that is the thing that we have not been able to make any meaningful progress on this session. That is the thing that has created pretty unique bedfellows. We in this chamber are all victims of gun violence. We all lost, for some of us, a colleague, for some of us, a friend, a leader. We are all now victims of gun violence. And in the almost 11 months since Mark and Melissa were killed, it has been, I don't know if anyone else, and I'm sure there are people in this room who were victims of gun violence before this tragic event, but it has been an interesting experience for me to come now into contact with people where I share something that I didn't before. And it cuts across a lot of lines. It cuts across racial lines, it cuts across class lines. We are part of this terrible club. We're part of this terrible club with the students and staff at Annunciation. We're part of this terrible club with the parents of Annunciation. We're part of this terrible club with the family and friends of the people that were shot outside Cristo Rey High School in Minneapolis the day before Annunciation. Gun violence creates a unique coalition, and we are now all a part of it. and yet we have not been able to do anything meaningful about it this session. And what we have been able to do is come together, and I appreciate the bipartisan effort. I appreciate Chair Moeller and Chair Novotny, Representative Green and Representative Anderson, Speaker Dameth. It is not lost on me that this effort to keep legislators safe has largely been led by women in this chamber. Women in this chamber who have faced different kinds of threats, who have been trying to raise the alarm again and again. So I wish we could be doing a lot more about school safety this session. I would love to do something about getting weapons of war away from our kids. I would love to make meaningful change for kids so that they can be safe at school. And I think we will do that. I think we will come back here and we will do that. And I want to make sure that we can get good people in these seats who can make that meaningful change. And if people are scared to run, and people are scared to be a part of democracy, we are not going to be able to get that. I just want to end, I really appreciate these efforts to do this bill because it's not an easy bill, and it's really personal to all of us. It's always weird to legislate when you have a personal connection. It's very weird to legislate when you're literally talking about your lives or your family's lives and keeping people you love safe. So I just really want to, again, thank Chair Moeller for taking on this work. She had to hear a lot of really hard stories and try to think about how to turn that into policy. There was a Rolling Stones article about Melissa that came out this past year, and it ends with this quote. Let me tell you one thing about Melissa Hortman. She wouldn't have stood there helpless and moony-eyed. No, she would have asked a single question. Are you going to stand there and moan? Are you going to help me pull these damn weeds? Thanks, Kelly, for pulling these damn weeds.
I recognize the member from Washington, Representative Hill.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you, members. I rise today to point out that several times in our education committees, proposals were brought by our colleagues across the aisle to remove funding that we put in place in the previous biennium. And this was funding that not only were our staff members and parents asking for it in our school communities, but our students themselves. This was our student support personnel funding. And what it did was it added additional dollars to budgets so that schools could hire more personnel in the way of school counselors, in the way of school psychologists, in the way of chemical health counselors. These are the things that our students are literally asking us for. When I talk to students and ask them what's the biggest challenge facing students today, it's almost unanimous. It's mental health. Our students need the support. And time again in bills brought by Republicans into the educational committee sphere, they were going to remove that funding. My students at the school where I have the honor of teaching are not asking me for a hardened school. They're asking me to have personnel on site so that they can be known, so that they can be cared for, and that they can get and access the care and support that they need to be successful. And I wanted to point that out because, again, we're talking about removing that support for other priorities. And I want to just make sure that people understand the importance of the student support personnel that I have the honor of being a colleague of, and the critical work that they do every day with our students around Minnesota. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Katiza-Wattoon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this is it's a really challenging topic, right? We've all been through a lot, but we are not the only ones who experienced the trauma of June 14th. Many of us are parents, not everybody. And I can tell you that my kids are traumatized. They knew Melissa. They adored Gilbert. And when we talk about keeping kids safe, it does not only apply to public and private schools. These buildings where kids ages 5 through 18 spend a lot of their days, right? Kids need protection in community centers. Kids deserve to be safe at malls and places of worship and entertainment venues, and when they come on a field trip to the state capitol and a child care center. I can go on and on, members, but to not support a proposal that is going to help keep all of us safer here in the work that we do and in our communities, so that the people around us, including our children or the children of our neighbors that live across the street, when an assassin is stalking us, for those of us who were on an assassin's hit list over the last year, this bill protects children. It protects our elders. It protects all of us. 3 of my kids are adopted out of the foster care system. And when we talk about health and safety, we need to remember that it doesn't just mean keeping them safe at school. It means investing in their development. It means making sure that they can afford childcare that's going to help their little brains grow. It means that they need food, healthy food to eat. So the things that we have before this body for consideration this year, like providing additional emergency food shelf and food bank funding so that kids can eat, so that they can grow. That's something that's really important. We need to support our counties with additional funding so that they can implement some case review in our child welfare and our child protection programs. These are all things that struggled to get out of the Children and Families Committee this year. And when we sit here and say, we're not going to take action on this bill that helps keep the public safe just because it also has the added benefit of keeping all of us safe, it doesn't make sense. It's so frustrating to see good bills being held hostage for a variety of different reasons. But ultimately, when we are sitting here and deciding to take a vote and saying that this bill doesn't protect kids and we have to put money to only the kids that attend public and private schools, it just doesn't make sense. We need to do more than this. I agree. But blocking this bill today doesn't do anything to keep our kids safer. Our kids in their homes, our kids in their communities, our kids in their schools. Members, I would urge a green vote on this bill today. This is a step in the right direction to make sure that our communities as a whole are safer. And that when people think about participating in a town hall, when we go back to our communities, they don't feel afraid that their representative might be attacked while they're in that same space. Or that when their kids, again, come to learn about representative government and democracy in the people's house, they don't have to be afraid. This is a good bill. I urge you not to hold it hostage. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I recognize a member from Dakota, Representative Hanson-Jay.
Thank you, Speaker. I keep hearing this talking point about protecting kids first. It's clearly delivered, first of all. And it's really hard to take that seriously from where I'm standing. We've seen no action on increasing school funding, no action on gun violence prevention, no action on dismantling the global pedophile Epstein class, no action on investing in families, no action in getting our counties the funding they need to make sure that we can have the gold standard of child protection, no action on making sure that our case reviews get supported, no action on making sure we can get more parent support outreach programs funded, which, by the way, it's the most effective way to prevent child abuse, right? We've not increased our investment in that since it started in 2013. I've come forward every year to talk about how important that is. And again, this year, we had that in a bill in the Children and Families Committee. And then magically, unilaterally one day, that bill just died. And we had no communication about that. Nobody told us we weren't going to pass a package out of that committee. Nobody had that discussion with our members. You know, we had a lot of work that could have moved forward from that committee or from others, including funding forensic interview training, Representative Johnson's bill. That bill makes sure that when children who have been victims of sexual assault have to tell their story, that they're telling that story in a situation and in an environment that is going to allow the court system to put pedophiles and people who rape children in jail. Exactly what you guys are saying that you supposedly want to do. But these are the kinds of services that we need to do in order to do that. That bill was killed. It's dead. It's nowhere. We had a bill about crisis nurseries from Chair Torkelson. Great bill, making sure we're supporting families who have littles who need that support before something awful happens. Dead, gone. That bill didn't get out of that committee. And again, sure, that happens all the time around this place. I understand that, but there's usually communication about it at least. Our committee members weren't even given that opportunity. And so these items that have been on the floor or in this body's hands at least, to have that support from everybody is just, it's not happening. So I think that's why it's hard to believe that this is really about putting, protecting kids first and doing that. I stand here ready, willing, and able with a proven history and track record of actually doing that work, and you're welcome to partner up anytime. But this session wasn't the one that anybody over there did that, and that's unfortunate because we did have that opportunity. So let us not mislead Minnesotans and say that we have a different agenda of protecting kids here, because we failed that this year. We could have done a lot of things. We could have moved really important, meaningful legislation forward that would have done the things that you're talking about doing. But I didn't have that support. When I tried to bring it up in committee, we were told, oh, all of this should be single-issue bills. Well, how do you expect to move these single-issue bills when on the final day of a committee, the co-chair doesn't tell anybody that we're not actually moving an omnibus bill?
Point of order. What member of business are we on?
We're on third reading of House File 3432. Representative Hanson-Jay.
Thank you, Speaker. And my point is saying that the argument I'm hearing right now of protect kids first, I'm not going to vote for this, folks say, because I want to protect kids first. I'm calling that out because that's not what's happened in this body. And I stand here again, ready, willing, and able. We still got time. Nothing's done till sine die, till that gavel drops. So if any of you want to work on any of the bills I've mentioned, you know where to find me. You know how to talk to our rules members. You know how to get those things moving. I would love to see movement on those things. So I would like to see you actually take action on the things that do protect kids. Thank you.
I recognize a member from Ramsey, Representative Gottfried.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I promise I'll be brief. You know, as I'm preparing comments for this, I thought of something that I actually heard in one of the ethics hearings relatively recently. I think Representative Hudson said something about everything here is manufactured, everything here is orchestrated to have a certain outcome. And I think that was actually an incredibly true statement that holds here today. It is very, very clear what the script is from many of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. And I do think that script is disingenuous. So let's take for example, the bill that was tried to be amended on to this particular provision here, that is 5015, carried by Representative Lawrence. And one of the things that it says in there, Section 4 of that, takes money that is supposed to go to student support personnel aid and allows it to be used for school hardening. And as my colleague here, Representative Hill, says, the way that you actually do that is by supporting your students through that student support personnel aid. So again, I don't think it does what my colleagues on the other side of the aisle says that it is supposed to do. And again, I think this is incredibly disingenuous. We are debating a bill about safety within the public forum so that we can protect democracy, so that we can protect those that enter this public forum. Here, all of us do our work, and yes, of course, protect judges, protect ourselves, protect everyone that exists within this entire space, this entire gallery here, and all the wonderful staff that we have in this room right here, right now. Now, we want to make this about education policy. That is what the other side of the aisle has tried to do this entire time. So let's talk about some bills that we voted on in education policy just for a second. ICE on school property, that was voted down, even though they were stalking several of our students of color as they tried to racially profile them and deport them for no reason other than the fact that they did not have the color, that they had more melanin in their skin than maybe I do.
Mr. Speaker, point of order.
State your point of order.
Mr. Speaker, what area of business are we on right now?
We continue to be on third reading of the House of Senate File 3432. Representative Godfrey, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And because my other colleagues on the other side of the aisle want to make this about a binary between protecting our students and protecting the people in this room, we're going to call out some fallacies in that. All right, we're to talk about one other bill that we voted on, a bill that would codify into state law the right of every child to a world-class education, regardless of their identity sets. That bill was voted down. Let's talk about some specific school safety bills that we brought forward. Representative Green had a bill that would put some parameters around which you would need safe storage of firearms in your vehicle on school property. That was voted down. Representative Rayrauer had a bill that would require an anonymous threat reporting system throughout our entire state. Every single public school had to have it. And I know there were arguments against mandates about it, but guess what? Statistics show that that sort of anonymous threat reporting system does not work unless it is mandated, unless it is everywhere. That was voted down. So don't come at us and say that we're not serious about protecting our students, protecting our children. That is a disingenuous argument, and I know it is clearly the script that you were all given. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I recognize a member from Olmsted, Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Well, a lot has been said, and I'm not going to repeat it. And thank you to many of our members on the DFL side who have pointed out that, indeed, we do care about children, and that we care about children and their safety and their well-being in a lot of ways. But I'm really just rising because I have a piece of this bill that came through Judiciary Committee. I appreciate the partnership of Co-Chair Scott on getting this, some of these items into the bill. And just want to mention to members that if you vote against this bill, you're voting against $4 million in funding that's going to go out through the judiciary in grants to harden courthouses. And as I'm sure most of you know, if you think about it a little bit, people go to court when they're upset. Sometimes they leave angrier than they came in. And courthouses can be the scene of a lot of violence, and they need security. And because of the partnership of Chair Scott, we actually increased the original amount and have a really robust package in here for courts to harden courthouses. And may I say, many of these courthouses are in rural areas. So a lot of them are in Republican districts. And if you vote no on this bill, you may just be saying, no, my local courthouse doesn't deserve funding for security. That would be a very bad vote. I would not want to take that vote. There's other security money in here for the courts. I know in her opening, Chair Moeller talked about some of that and the importance of it, and I won't repeat this here. I just really want to thank her and thank Co-Chair Novotny for his work. This is obviously not easy on so many levels, and I'm looking forward, notwithstanding that some of you don't seem to really care if you take a bad vote against your own district, I'm looking forward to seeing this pass, get to conference, and come back even better. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Lee X.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let's bring it back to capital security then, hardening. On January 6th, 2021, was a beautiful day where there were many, many peaceful, friendly, loving patriots who visited our national capital. And it was such a wonderful display that in June of 2021, July, Congress passed $2.1 billion in emergency funding to pay back the National Guard, to fund Capitol Police needs, to harden the Capitol complex, windows, security cameras. So on that day, we fortunately didn't lose our vice president, because we all clearly saw there was a noose and calls to hang Vice President Mike Pence. And rest in peace, we did unfortunately lose some Capitol officers. Members, we lost Speaker Emerita Melissa Hortman and her husband Mark. We almost lost Senator John Hoffman and his wife Yvette, maybe his daughter Hope as well. And we're here asking for, sure, $44 million over the next 4 years to harden our capital. Congress was bipartisan. I mean, it passed the Senate 98-0. It passed the House 416 votes to 11. $2.1, probably a little bit more, because there was some other $60 million that went to something else, but well over $2 billion to harden the Capitol. So I think that what we are asking, again, is very reasonable. All the great work that was done to bring this bill and this package to the floor is reasonable. I don't see why we don't all vote green. Thank you.
I recognize a member from Anoka, Representative Niska.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Obviously, this topic still hits a lot of us pretty personally, and it should. But we need to think about it at a little bit of a higher level. This isn't about protecting any of us personally, and I certainly can understand the perception out there. This is about protecting. This topic is dealing with a problem about protecting something really fundamental about what makes the United States of America, the greatest country that's ever been. And we see it on the walls here. We see up in the front, Vox Populorum est Vox Dei. The voice of the people is the voice of God, because we have a system of government where the people are in charge and they express their view through elections where they send us here down at the Capitol to make laws on our behalf. And this isn't about whether any of us individually is safe here. It's about whether the voice of the people can be reflected here at the Capitol and in the laws that we make, because the people's voice is cheapened if someone doesn't run for office because they're afraid of what's going to happen here, or if someone is afraid to vote for the best policy because they're afraid of what might happen to them. And on the back we have, reason is the life of law. America is great because we have the rule of law. And that means that we need to have judges who can decide cases based on reason and the law and not worry about whether their decision means that they're going to be gunned down in the courtroom or at home. So we need to keep in mind that political violence is wrong, not just because it's violence against people, but because it strikes at the heart of our form of government. So this is an important topic. This is an important topic. And it's an important bill. There are good provisions and reforms in this bill. We recognize the need for this, especially on June 14th, as we saw definitely a need for a more coordinated response at the state level, at the very least. And there are good provisions in this bill. Representative Duran has a good provision in this bill that assigns more responsibility, is more clear about who has responsibility for investigations here. Representative Anderson and Representative Green did good work on making sure that we know whose job it is to do certain things as it relates to coordinating statewide security response. There are legitimate concerns about this bill as well. I think there are legitimate concerns that have been raised about the cost. It's important to recognize that this bill, through the hard work of Chair Novotny especially, is significantly lower in its spending than the version that was passed by the Senate, than the version that was requested by the governor. I hope we can go further on that. But it is important, and not for us personally, for our system of government, that we address safety from political violence and that we do it in a bipartisan way. And this bill is an effort to do that. But as you've heard and as has been discussed, we need to prioritize school safety, and we need to prioritize doing that in a bipartisan way. And the difficulty that you've heard from many of those on this side of the aisle is based on the fact that when Republicans brought forward bipartisan school safety proposals, beginning from last September, we heard from across the aisle on April 15th, I believe. On April 14th in the Education and Finance Committee, and on April 15th on the floor, we heard from across the aisle, we can't proceed on those other bipartisan solutions to school safety without gun control. Everything else when it comes to school safety has been conditioned on gun control. But now we see, and I think the people of Minnesota see today, that that's just been a political game. We know that it's been a political game because when it comes to this bill, Democrats are willing to move forward with bipartisan provisions, including funding, without conditioning it on gun control. Representative Katiza-Watun said it's frustrating to have good bills being held hostage. That's what the people of Minnesota have seen. They've seen bipartisan proposals on school safety held hostage by demands for gun control. I'm not going to hold this bill hostage. I'm going to vote to let it proceed through the process. A lot of folks on this side of the aisle are going to vote no, and it's Representative Liebling. It's not because they don't believe in hardening courthouses, although I did hear a concern maybe addressed by one of your members that maybe judges will be traumatized if we harden courthouses. But judges should be safe in courthouses, and we should think about the most efficient, fiscally responsible way to do that. But we shouldn't condition those bipartisan agreements on gun control, even though I heard Representative Jones and Representative Pinto and Representative Sensor-Mura say the real problem we're trying to deal with here is a problem that we should be dealing with gun control. Same argument that was made on the school safety bills from the other side of the aisle, but for some reason, when it comes to this bill, moving forward with those bipartisan solutions is not being conditioned on gun control. So I don't believe that this bill is about us personally. It's not about us serving ourselves personally. It's not about us protecting ourselves individually as politicians. But Minnesotans might be left to wonder why this bill can move forward, these bipartisan solutions can move forward without gun control, when Democrats are conditioning things we should be able to agree on about keeping our kids safe in school because Republicans won't agree to ban guns. That does make it look personal. So I'm going to vote to move this forward. I know it still has to go to conference committee. But I do want to encourage my friends across the aisle not to take for granted that there would be votes to pass this coming out of conference if we don't find a way to address those bipartisan things we can agree on to keep our kids safe in school without holding those provisions, in Representative Katiza-Watoon's words, hostage. We do need to protect our system of government. We do need to make some reforms to make sure that it's clear who's responsible and that they have the resources to keep our public officials safe, to keep our judges safe, so we can have a Republican form of government, vox popularum est vox Dei, so we can have the rule of law. Reason is the life of law. This is important. But it's not more important than protecting our kids. And it shouldn't be, and that shouldn't be held hostage any more than this one should be. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I recognize the member from Ramsey, Representative Perez-Vega.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of this chamber, heard a lot of different stories and data, personal stories, different schools, different districts. We've all experienced tragedy together. We're reminded of it every day. I want to thank our Chief Clerk, Patrick Murphy, for reminding us every day in the memory of our late great speaker, Melissa Hortman, and the roses that we all see as a reminder in the memory of what she embedded in not only us in this chamber, but the entire state of Minnesota. I've had so much different experiences with different security in different areas of my work as a youth worker, with over 5 Nobel Peace Laureates that I've been honored to work alongside, and thousands of youth across this country. I'm also an artist who performs for over 20 years. I mean, I was a kid on stages here in the state that gave me an opportunity to connect with Latin America, the Caribbean, through funding opportunities for children and arts due to what we have experienced in our communities of gun violence. And in my other professional career as an artist, outside of being a politician, the experiences of hundreds of thousands in a crowd to 50 in a crowd, or let it be a university or even an elementary school, there has been better services of security and protecting individuals as public figures than I've experienced in this building since the moment I was sworn in. In April of last year, I've been around folks that are in my band, people that work professional security for the biggest stages that we all love to attend our concerts in the arenas, whether it's in Bemidji, Rochester, Moorhead, to right here in our Twin Cities, from US Bank Stadium to First Avenue and the GCA. And you go through a massive security to ensure that everyone is safe, because there's a lot of things happening. There's workers that need to be there, that are staff that need to be safe. There's family and children that need to be safe. It's just been the norm, as if you're walking into a grand arena, to make sure that everything runs smoothly. In April of 2025, the political violence that has came and stricken, that we've seen and experienced even before June, really brought me to say, I need a Linus blanket in this place. I need something to feel safe. In our culture, and I pay this to tribal people because we are tribal people, we feel things. We are connected to things. It is a glorious thing to feel that, because we're living. That means we're feeling. But there's something that, as someone that has heard the worst of what we think is okay is not okay when it comes to gun violence, when folks want to debate for hours on just what you think is common sense. I have not ever felt safe. And it's not to say that we don't have great people doing their jobs. It's that there needs to be updated services within that training. And my father is a Vietnam veteran. My grandfather, may he rest, was a World War II veteran. And they always made sure that I understood to always listen to your gut feeling. And that's something that I've heard from a lot of the veterans that I've been able to speak with, because when we're talking about individual security response to credible threats, when we're talking about legislative service unit to update to help our security, those are coming from not just gut, but from what we've actually experienced right here, that we're reminded of every day. I can't seem to think as to, if I'm going to do a show at First Avenue, whether it's 50 people in a small room or 1,300 in the large room, that there was more security making sure that from the artists to the patrons that were purchasing those tickets felt safe and are able to go home at the end of the night. But I don't feel that. I didn't feel that in April of 2025. I had folks that do the security there, not to do my security here, because we have folks to do the security here, but to establish, to feel that I felt okay to do my job. Because it's not about having this isn't a diva moment of I'm having personal security because I'm the legislator. No, we carry an estimated of 42,000 people that we are responsible in the districts to provide law, each and every member of this chamber. That security isn't just for me as a representative or our leaders as our speakers. It's for everybody and who we represent. And this is their house. And they deserve the same safety. I have members in the gallery who came to visit today because this means a lot to me. This language means a lot of planning that we have been trying to organize. And is it perfect? But that's what laws is. You make it better every time. But we need to pass this. We need to make sure that we don't have that is their gut feeling right now because we're up to date or we're catching up, because the reality is that this isn't it for what? The massive guns and the violence have taken folks away from me that I can't count on two hands what have been experienced as a kid at a private school right outside in the parks from your area to mine. So what I'm just urging here, I don't want my kid to ask me, Mom, are you safe to go to work today? Because Mama Goose, AKA that's what she called Madam Speaker Melissa, has been taken away. And on January 28th of 2026, as we're preparing for this session, I'm in our caucus room. Our safe spaces, right? They're supposed to be our safe spaces. And as I'm plugging my charger from my computer to hop on a Zoom to give a legislative pregame update to the national and global world that's watching us, right outside that window, there's federal agents, masked, days after a nurse was killed at the VA, on the streets. So if folks are just trying to be blindfolded about reality here, I think maybe it's like Men in Black when they tell you, look at the light here and just forget it happened. Well, guess what? This is real life. And there's not a stick to take that away from you. There's not a stick to go in front of my child to say, Mamita, look right here, because what you've seen in the political violence of people running around in guns at our mercados and in front of your school in the football fields that we play in, that didn't happen. Let's get a move on something to make us feel safer. Not just here, but yes, in our schools too. Our future deserves this, y'all. Our kids, those 42,000 people that you represent in your district, that's why we need security, because they want to make sure that we're safe while we're trying to get things together here. Think about it. Smell the roses. They're fresh every day.
I recognize a member from Sherburne, Representative Novotny.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's been a well-argued out bill, and I don't think I'm going to change anybody's mind here with a clever saying that I will come up with the end. I will say that we are doing this. We're moving towards what will be the final bill. We need to get this step done so we can go to that final bill, whatever it is. This isn't about me. It's not about Chair Moeller. We will both be gone 10, 15 years from now. Patrick Murphy will probably still be here, but we won't. But with that, I urge a green vote so we can get to the conference committee. Thank you.
I recognize a member from Ramsey, the author of the bill, Representative Moeller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I do want to address a few things that were said during this debate. First of all, thank you for the thorough and rigorous debate on this bill. One of the things I heard was that the security measures that we have in place and other ones that we'll be adding make this not the people's house anymore, and that couldn't be further from the truth. I have heard from so many people who work here, people who visit here, that are so thankful to have added security here. And I'll just note that before we added some of those systems, the weapon detection in particular, we were one of a minority of states that actually didn't have that or didn't ban guns in the Capitol complex. I'll also note that even though we added those systems, we still have our constituents visiting us, rallies, numerous days on the Hill, community members coming and protesting, school groups coming through here. I just talked to some of my students from my school district yesterday. I don't think any of us can say that because we added those security measures, fewer people are coming to the Capitol. That's just simply not true. And this bill does protect kids. We have talked about that, both for people coming here, in the courthouses, and again, it hasn't been said enough, the BCA threat assessment that this bill funds to be looking at threats in places like schools or places where many people gather. And I will say on top of that, school safety is also a priority for this caucus, comprehensive school safety. We heard gun violence prevention bills the first time we had the gavel in the Public Safety Committee, and those were bills brought to us by the Annunciation families and other victims of gun violence. On March 26th, we tried to get those up on the floor, and we voted yes, the other side did not. And one thing that I have heard repeatedly is, well, let's just vote on something we can all agree on. We can all agree on those things. We should all agree on those things. I do want to just ask the chairs of the education committees for a moment if Chair Youakim will yield, Mr. Speaker.
She will yield. Representative Moeller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Chair Youakim, I am not a member of your committee, and I would just like to know what are some of the other school safety measures you've considered?
Representative Youakim.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Chair Moeller. We did hear, as Representative Krusha had a hearing on school safety. We had a hearing on some school safety proposals that we were thinking about, as well as a really important presentation from the Gun Violence Prevention Resource Center. And that really framed what we were looking at school safety, because I think sometimes we have different definitions in this place. Like, I'm hearing a very odd definition of bipartisan from across the aisle. You know, taking another member's bill and co-opting it and changing it isn't bipartisan. And different definition maybe of what comprehensive school safety looks at. And that's why we had the Gun Violence Prevention Resource Center folks in. They have done research for over a decade on mass shootings across the country. And of course, unfortunately, some of those are in our schools. And what they talk about is that 80% of the students that perpetrate this crime are either current or former students. They know how to get around the systems. They've done all the drills. 80% also show signs of depression, isolation, and mental health services that are mental health issues that are going unchecked. And 90% of those kiddos tell somebody. And finally, of course, they talked about the guns. 57% of those students get a gun from family, friends, or steal it. Representative Green's bill, I will never forget the statistic her students brought to the table about the safe storage on school grounds, that every 9 minutes a gun is stolen out of a car. So when we were looking at school safety, our definition is comprehensive. Looks a lot like what the bill from the Senate is that they put together. We've talked about making sure that schools have that wraparound services with adults. That's why we created the Student Support Personnel Aid, to get more counselors, social workers, nurses, and psychologists in our schools to help our students. And guess what? Your first bill from Representative Lawrence took that money away to put towards hardening schools. And I see you shaking your head, but what is in this bill does not provide extra money for our public schools. $10 a student when $36 that they have to levy themselves, but $46 for everybody else in straight aid. I would not think that would be something that our public schools would like. We have also safe storage in our bill to make sure that at least on school grounds that people are securing their weapons if they're not on their person. But finally, too, and this is something maybe we can all agree on, that anonymous threat reporting is so important. It's important because 90% of the kids tell somebody. That happens in our community, too. And I know that's something we can agree on. We still have time. I'm still waiting to try to put an education bill together. We still have time to do that. I'm still waiting to hear from your side of the aisle on that. I know there's some there's some space there that we can still do that. But what I also want to say is what we're hearing from our students. As Representative Hill said, we're hearing how much they need those mental health supports in our schools. So our bill also added money onto the Student Support Personnel Aid. And then we're also hearing from our communities, because we really need to get serious about school safety. I'm sorry. This isn't about just addressing the issue in our classrooms. This is about our communities. This is about firearms everywhere, as Representative Lee said, and others have on this floor. Kids deserve to feel safe everywhere. There is an entire generation that is living in fear of gun violence. They're living in fear of gun violence, and it would just take a few of you to join us in passing a comprehensive bill that includes those mental health supports, that includes anonymous threat reporting, and that includes getting weapons of war off our streets. Because members, all of it has to be together if we're really going to keep our kids safe, not just in our schools, but in our communities, at the Capitol, in movie theaters, in malls. So there's still time, folks. Let's start getting serious.
Representative Moeller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for that, Chair Youakim. And similarly, I'm not on the Education Policy Committee, and if Chair Jordan would yield for a question.
She will yield. Representative Moeller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Chair Jordan, can you describe some of the school safety measures that your committee heard?
Representative Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Chair Moeller. School safety was a top priority for Democrats in education policy. We are a policy-only committee, so we have very, very, very few committee days. Our first committee day was devoted to school safety, where we talked about the fear that students and educators have from federal ICE agents on their school. Our second day, so half of the DFL gavels were devoted to school safety measures. On our second day, we heard directly from students from Medina High School who were talking about the importance of safe storage. We also heard from Representative Ray Rauer, who had been working with Sandy Hook Promise and working with stakeholders from school districts to the BCA, the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, the Minnesota Department of Education. We had votes on that ICE bill. We had votes on Representative Green's safe storage bill. Every single Republican in my committee voted against advancing those to the next committee, including many members of that committee who just spoke today about how there wasn't anything done on public safety and gun violence in schools. So for those of you who spoke today, you had an opportunity in education policy to vote to keep kids safe, and you voted against keeping kids safe. Some of those bills have managed, and this was not votes to send these to the floor, these were votes to advance these to other committees so they could continue to be worked on. But those were what we focused on in education policy. Half of our gavel times were devoted to public safety and keeping kids safe in schools. So we spent more time on that issue than any other issue in education policy, starting from the very first committee day.
Representative Moeller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for that, Chair Jordan. And members, I'll wrap up right now, but I do want to say that there was a mistake made when I heard people say that this bill puts us over kids. And actually heard some incorrect information that the money we are spending in this bill is for us and just to harden this building. Maybe some of you, the chamber was fairly empty when I started speaking, and so maybe some of you weren't here when I gave the introduction to the bill, and so I just want to reread the first paragraph that I read when I introduced this bill to wrap this up as well. I said, first, this bill is not limited to legislators, as some may try to suggest later, but is instead a crucial bill to public safety. This bill provides important protections to the public at courthouses across the state, to the public on Capitol grounds, and to the public in the form of threat assessment by the BCA. And as we've heard here too, to the public when we're out in community spaces. It is crucial for public safety. It is crucial for the exercise of First Amendment rights. It is crucial for our democracy. Members, vote yes.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. The clerk will call the names of the members voting remotely.
Allen.
You're up.
Allen votes no.
Allen votes no. Burkle.
Go ahead, John.
Burkle, aye.
Burkle votes aye. Kozlowski.
Kozlowski votes yes.
Kozlowski votes aye. McDonald.
McDonald, no.
McDonald votes no. Momani Hiltzley.
No. Momani Hiltzley, aye.
Momani Hiltzley votes aye. Walgamot.
Walgamot, aye.
Sorry, can you do it again?
Walgamot votes aye.
Walgamot votes aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 92 yeas and 42 nays, the bill is passed as amended and its title agreed to.